Welcome to part 4 of our series on learning how to code. In the first few videos before this, we've learned how to save, we've designed our forms and all that. Now we actually can get to the part where we want to add some code to our program and make it do things. So let's get into it. So first of all, from the last lesson, we should have had a program that you designed where you added shapes to your form and you renamed the shapes. You gave them particular types of shapes like circles and that, and you gave them specific colors. And I told you particularly to make sure that you rename them properly so that you got like a nice little face. So this is the one I've designed for this particular video. So you can see there on the right hand side, you can see all the different components I use. They're all shapes and they're all SHP something. So they all got a nice little name. So I know which one I'm referring to whenever I'm writing code. That's why we want to use that prefix. So let's think about this. So we've got this lovely little program that we want to change. We want to change something on it. So let's take, for example, the SHP face. That is a shape. And in the previous lesson, we learned that it is an object of type T-shape class. And we changed, as we said, the name, the type of shape it is, and the brush.color properties. So that's what we did in the last lesson. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our palette. And there on the standard palette, you're going to see that there is a button. And I really want to put a button on our form. So I'm going to click on that button and add it to our form. So there you can see a button has been added to the form. Now this is a brand new object. It is an object of type T button. And we've got a default name of button1. I don't like that name, so let's give it a better name. So I'm going to call it BTN change hair, because I want this button to change the hair of my little face that's on the screen. Now you would have noticed if I do that, if I change the name of the button to BTN change hair, you might notice that the actual whatever is displayed in the button there, you can see it's also changed to BTN change hair. And we don't really have buttons that have like that type of text on it when we actually view them in everyday programs. So there's another property called the caption property. And that has also been changed to BTN change hair. Now these two properties are very different. The name is the name that we refer to the component or the object directly. It's the name, it follows all those rules, but the caption is what is displayed to the user. So we can change the caption to whatever we want. We can have spaces, there's no real rules for it as long as it's text. So that's what I'm going to change. I'm going to change that to the actual text, change space hair. And by doing that, you'll see the button actually looks like a little bit better. The name hasn't changed. It's still BTN change hair, but the caption, what is being displayed, is different. So that's more ideal of what I want to do. So there we go. There's the properties of it. Now we're going to finally get to the methods, the things that our objects can do. Now I don't care what the shapes are going to be doing. I care about what this button's going to do. I want it to actually do something. So when I go to the object inspector for the button, there you can see all the details. We change the caption. There we go. Now that little tab there next to properties, that's the events tab. That has all the things that this button can do. And there's a whole list of them. Now, the one that's important to me is that on-click event, because I want my program to do something when the user clicks on this BTN change hair button. So that's what's going to be important to me. So I will double click on that. And when I do that, it will take me to a place where we can write code. So this is the place where we can write code. We're actually going to type some code into this part. But before we let's just understand what we are seeing here. There you can see this is a procedure for the BTN change hair button when it gets clicked. That's what that little part means. BTN change hair click, that means when this button gets clicked, you must run this code. And by this code, I'm referring to anything that occurs between the begin and end for this procedure. You see there's a little end at the end there with a full stop. That means the end of the program. That's not a connection to the procedure. The begin and end after the procedure word, that is whatever's between those two. It's almost like brackets. Whatever's between there is what will happen, what the code will execute when we click on that button. Okay, so that's what event-driven programming is. Okay, and at the bottom of our screen, you should see a little tab like this where you can see you can go between the code and the design. This allows me to what we call toggle, to go between the code and the design. Design was when we put the stuff on the form, all those components and those objects. That was the design part, and here we are in the code part. You can switch between them by clicking on the different tabs, or you can press F 12. That'll also work as well. That'll also help you to toggle between the two. So let's just quickly talk about event-driven programming. Now, event-driven programming means each button or each object has its different methods. They are events, and those events, we write code for these events, but they don't do anything unless that event is triggered. So for example, if we've got 3 buttons and they've got code for each of those buttons when the button gets clicked, those buttons the code for them will not execute unless we actually click on those buttons. And the way we click on them will also determine how the code is executed. So for example, in this case, if I go and I click on button 1, and then I go and click on button 3, and then I go and click on button 2, then those events will be triggered in the order that we clicked on them. So first, button 1's code will be executed, then button 3's code will be executed, and then button 2's code will be executed. And if I take a scenario where I click on button 1 first, and then I click on button 3 next, and then I click on button 1 again, then again, that's how the code will be executed. It'll be button 1's code first, then button 3's code, and then button 1 will execute its code a second time. That's how event-driven programming works. Now, when we write code for these events, we have to have a particular statement that we want to execute, or a series of statements. So we need to know the structure of a statement. So this is the little bit where we're going to get to the code part. So when we write a piece of code, when we want to execute a statement, then it's always what you want to change. Okay, so what is it that you want to change, followed by a colon equal to sign. That's what we call the assigned. We assign it a value. And then on the right hand side of that, we will have the value, or a new value that we want to change it to. And then at the end, we have a semicolon. The semicolon indicates the end of the statement. So it's always what you want to change on the left hand side. And then you have the assigned symbol and what you want to change it to on the right hand side. So whatever's on the right hand side won't be changed. That's just the value that it's going to be, that the left thing is going to be changed to. So let's take an example. So we've got our little form over there. Do you see our tongue is sticking out now? It's very rude to stick out a tongue. So we want to get rid of the tongue. So I'm going to select I want to look at that tongue. So the SHP tongue, I need to get rid of it somehow. So if I go look at the properties of the SHP tongue, you'll notice there is a visible property, which makes the tongue visible or not. It makes it invisible if it's not true. So that's if it's false. So that's what I want to do. I want to change the tongue's property, its visible property, to false. So when you want to access a property of an object, then you just put a dot followed by the name of that property, in this case dot visible, and then we're going to assign it a new value. Currently, it is true. So we're going to assign it, using the assign symbol, a new value. And we don't want it to be true, we want it to be false. So we write the word false. And then remember, every line has a semicolon at the end. Don't forget the semicolon. Okay, there we go. That's great. Now, that's what the code will be to make that tongue disappear. Now, it's very important to take note of when we're dealing with this type of thing. When I was a little baby, I had this little toy like this. I don't know, it was like a shape thing where we used to put those little yellow things. They had different size shapes, and you could slot them into the hole that the shape would match. So, for example, if you had a star, there's a little star there, you could put the star into the little ball, but only if you put it into the star hole. So it would only fit in there. So you had to make sure that you match the shape with the right thing that you put into it. So you had to make sure that it matched. It had to match. Otherwise, if it didn't fit, then it's because you put the wrong shape in the wrong hole. So that is very important. We've got to make sure that they match. The item that you put into it must match. So that matches. If I had, for example, the cross section and I wanted to put in this trapezium into it, it wouldn't fit because they're not the matching shapes. So that is obviously a problem. That's wrong. It doesn't fit. But if I had the cross little yellow component and I could put that into the cross hole, that would fit. So therefore that would be fine. That would work. There we go. So that if we understand that, then you'll understand a little bit about how the structure of the statements must be. For example, if in this case, did you notice that the visible property needs a true or a false? And we gave it a false. So therefore that's a match. Okay, so let's take the width of the tongue. If we wanted to change the width of the tongue, what is the property of the width? There you go. You see, it's a number. So I can't go and make the width equal to hello. That's not a match. It doesn't fit. But I can give it a number. I can give it a number like 50, and that is a match, and that works. Okay, so that's great. Now, what about the color of the tongue? Now, if you remember the color of the tongue, the color property is a part of the brush property. So how do I get to the color part? Well, you say dot brush because that is the property that we're referring to. But to get to the color part, you must say dot color after it. So when you get into sub properties, you can add more dots with the sub property after it. So the tongue, shp tongue.brush.color, we want to change it to a different color. And there you can see all the colors have CL in front of it. So CL lime, CL whatever. So I'm going to change it to CL white. That's a predefined code in Delphi. So we can make it CL white. And therefore that is a match because it's a color, special color code going into a color property. So that's a match. So that's exactly what I want. So let's get to our code over here before we get to the position on the screen. I'm going to go here to the side here. We were working with additional components. You can see it's very similar to form. I'm going to go to standard and I'm going to go find a button and put a button on the form. I'm going to put it a little slightly up here and I'm going to change its name all the way down here to name. Do you see it selected? Name BTN change hair. So there we go, BTN change hair. Now you see I don't like that it's changed what it looks like. I'm going to come up here to the caption property. Remember the caption property is what is actually displayed. So we want to just display to change space hair. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So the button's still called BTN change hair, but just what is displayed is called change hair. And now I want to go to the event where you get to click on it. Now there's two ways to do it. The one way is to go to events and we want to go to the on click event. So if I click over here and then double click, I will get to the part of the code where we can write about what must happen when we change the hair or when we click on that button. Now let's go back to the design. Another way you can do it, every component has a default event. Now a default event is the on click event. So you can literally double click on the button and it'll take you to that code for this case. Okay, so we want to change the hair. Now if I go back here, that's another place where you can go back between the form and the code. Now I want to change the color of the hair. Now there's two parts to the hair. You see there's the face, there's a fringe, and there's hair. So I want to change both of them. So I'm going to change them to a different color. So I'm going to, let's make this person very old. So their hair is going to go white. So I'm going to go double click here and we're going to say, okay, SHP. And then which property are we going to go to? We're going to go to the hair property. Dot. What property? We want to change the color. So there is no color. You'll see that all the possible options will appear over here for you. So you can see exactly what you type in. So in this case, we are typing CLO or CO, sorry, COL. Yeah. Let's type it in, see what happens. COL. And there is no color property. Because there's a brush property, Mr. Long. So let's go. There we go. You can see that the brush is appearing. And then I'll press dot. And then I can type C. And there's color. So I can actually get to the color property like that. Remember American spelling. So there's no U in it. And I'm going to assign it a value of CL white. Okay. So there we go. Now, let's just run it and see what it does. Now, when I mean run it, what does that mean? Like this little play button over here. This is what we click on when we want to see if the code all works and we want to actually run the program to see what it will look like if the program's actually being used by someone else. So we're going to click on this run button. And it's going to, compile the program into an exe file. And now this little the form will pop up. But there won't be any dots. This is what the program looks like when it's actually running. This is what it will actually look like if it's actually executing the program. So when you don't see the dots, then you know this is the program that's running. Now if I click on that button, it's going to execute this code. So if I click on it, there we go. You can see that the hair color has now changed to white. But obviously the fringe looks a bit weird. So we must change the fringe as well. So I'm going to close this. If I close the program that's running, it's not going to close Delphi. It just closes the program. And there we go. I'm back into design time. I'm now in designing the program. I'm going to actually change the shape of the fringe as well. It must also change to white. So it's exactly the same. Now I'm writing another line of code. Now what am I doing here? This is a second line of code. Now the way it will work, anything between that begin end will happen when I click on that button, and it will execute the code in that order. So it'll first do this, then do that. But it'll do it so quickly you won't even notice the difference. So let's try it. So we run, and when the code pops up, there we go, there's my program. Now when I click on the button, there we go. You can see the nice little fringe is white and the hair is white as well. Okay, so there we go. So that you can see it changed both of them. If I wanted to change that tongue to go to invisible as well, then I could, if I want to do that on the same button, then I go shp tongue dot visible. Now this is a true or false value, so I'm going to make it equal to false. Okay, now Delphi isn't case sensitive, so it doesn't actually matter if I did this or if I did this. It would all be fine. It would all work exactly the same. So let's run that. So now the hair is going to change to white and the tongue's going to disappear. There we go. Maybe they didn't want to stick out their tongue so much because they were frightened about the hair disappearing because it's going white. So there we go. So those are the types of things that you can do. Okay, now if you made a mistake, this is a little key, if you made a mistake in your code, then what will happen is you will get an error and the program will not compile. So for example, let's say I didn't put a semicolon over there because that's one of the rules. And let's say I typed in color as a U. Then when I run the program, it will actually tell me, hey, there are errors. And when you click OK, it will highlight the first error that it picks up. And then over here, it'll try to tell you what is the possible option or solution to it. It says it doesn't recognize color. Ah, Mr. Long, that's supposed to be C-L-O, it's a C-O-L-U-O-R, no U. And then I run it again. Well, that problem's gone, but there's still another problem. It's over here. Ah, there's a missing operator or semicolon, but there isn't a semicolon. There are. When it says missing semicolon, it's normally the line above it. So that's what we call debugging. That means we are getting rid of the bugs in our program and any errors that are in our program, the syntax errors. We'll learn about errors another time. So there we go. So that when it makes the program pop up and compile, then you know all the errors are gone. Okay. Now, I just want to talk about the position on the form. So like, where are these components positioned on the form? So let's just take, for example, in mathematics, you might have learned about the Cartesian plane, and you would have known that that is the origin. In other words, it's a 0, 0 for the X and the Y. And if I move to the side a little bit, so if I move to the right, then what is that affecting? That's affecting the X value. The X value gets bigger. Okay. And if I move up, so we say move right, the X gets bigger. Now, if I move the X a bit up, if I go up and down, that would obviously affect the Y value. So the Y value is changing. Okay, so in that case, when you move up, the Y gets bigger. When I move to the right, the X gets bigger. In this case, if I move from the Cartesian plane. So that's what we learned in mathematics at school. Now, on Delphi, or in a Delphi form, it is slightly different. The top right or left-hand corner there, the top left-hand corner is the actual origin. That is, there isn't an X or Y value, but there is a top property and a left property. So that will be set to 0, 0 when it's at the top corner there, top left corner. And then if I move a little bit, let's say I'm going to move to the right. So I'm moving to the right of the screen. That's going to affect the left property. The left property will get bigger. I know it doesn't make sense, but if you understand that the furthest left is the 0. So if you move right, the left gets bigger. If I move to the left property will get smaller. That's the opposite. And if I move down, then the top property gets bigger. So there we go. So if I move down, the top property gets bigger. If I move up, the top property will get smaller because the top left-hand corner is 0, 0. So you understand that concept. So what have I done so far? I've created another button. I went and put another button on my form because I want this button to do something differently. I gave it the name of BTN Move Left Eye. So that's the name of the button. And the caption is Move Left Eye with spaces. So when I double click on this button, you'll notice I'll go to a set of code which is different to the previous one. The previous one's above it. If I scroll up, there's the code for the change hair button, and this is the code for the move left eye button. So whatever happens between this begin and end will be executed when we click on this button, and it won't do any of that unless we click on the change hair button for that one. So in this case, we want to change the left property of the left eye. So I'm going to say btn left eye, its left property. I want to change it to something now. btn left eye. Do I have a btn left eye? Let's have a look. btn, oh, not a btn, Mr. Long. It is a shape, so it's shp. SHP left eye. There we go. That's a little bit better. So SHP left eye. So the left eye, I want it to move this way. So I'm moving it to the left. In other words, the left eye, its current position, its current left property, if I scroll up here to the left, is 192. I'm going to move it this way. It's going to get smaller because this is 0. So it's going to get smaller. So if I make that left property 150, it's obviously going to move this side, if that makes sense. So let's make it 150, semicolon. Do they match? That is a number. The left needs a number. Yes, that's a match. So they fit. Must make sure that they fit. And I'm also going to change the pupil, left pupil, because obviously the eye has a pupil. You can move your mouse over it. You see, yes, SHPL pupil. That must also move. Left is equal to, I'm going to make it, I'm going to see what the difference is between the two. If I click the left eye, you can see the coordinates there. It's 192 and this is 200. So it's about 8 ahead of it. So I'm actually going to move this to 158. This is just my numbers over there. There we go. So remember, make sure that you've got the right. If I say hello, it's going to go, hey, I don't know what this is. There's an error there. It's already picking up the error. So it must be it must be a number. And it can't be a decimal number because that's also a problem, because that only needs a whole number. So there we go. Let's run that and see what it does. So there's our program. It's running. If I move the left eye, there we go. The eye moved a little bit to the side there. You see, it hasn't changed the hair because we haven't executed that button. If I click on that button now it's executed the button. Now, if I click the move left eye again, it looks like it's done nothing, but it actually did. It did execute that code. It just, the left eye was already at that position, so we didn't see a change in the form. So there we go. So there we've got our basics for the programming. Remember, it's always what you want to change on the left, followed by a colon equal to, followed by what you want to change it to. Okay, so that's what you write between the begin and the end of all of your events, which are probably going to be buttons when you click on them. Okay, and remember, you can toggle between them using this over here, and you can use that over there as well, the toggle F12 as well, to go between the code and the form. Just a thing to remember, that when we did this program, remember we changed the properties in the object inspector. This is when we were designing the program to see what it's going to look like from the very beginning. And this is referred to as design time. When we're at design time, that's what we're changing the properties of the components and the objects so that they appear when the program starts. When I want to change using code, so when I use code to change the properties, that's actually changing the code at runtime, which means those properties haven't changed until the program is being executed and those events are being triggered at runtime when the program has been executed. And while we're here, just let's have a look. When I go into the files with all my Delphi files, if I see there's Win32 folder, if I double click on that Win32 folder and I double click on debug, here is the exe file. That's the file that actually is the program. That's the completed program. If I double click on it, it'll show me what the program runs normally. So that's what I can give to people to say, here's the program. You don't need the code. This is all you need to run the program. And it does exactly what it does from the last time you compiled it. If you are using Delphi 2010, then that exe file will probably be somewhere over here. It won't be in the Win32 folder. It'll just be in this part with all your other pieces of code. So what I want you to do now is take your form that you created from the previous lesson that you've got all the shapes on, add buttons to your form, and make sure that all the buttons have unique and suitable names and captions, and then write code on each of those buttons that change different properties of the shapes. Go explore, go look at the object inspector to see the different properties and see what you can change. So that's what I encourage you to do before the next lesson. Please support the channel by clicking on that subscribe button. Go to our playlist, go see the rest of the series on learning how to code as well as other topics there. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.